laying out that picture so clearly. The short answer is no, it does not have to be that way. I think just maybe before diving into more details on that, some reflections on how this has happened over the course of the plastics treaty negotiations. I think we've heard a lot about the different playbooks or not the different playbooks, the different industries using the same playbook that's been going on for decades and in different spaces, and in all these spaces, I think it started with the tobacco industry, so that's another space that hasn't been mentioned but is absolutely super relevant here. And in the plastics treaty, we've been talking about this since INC 1. There were statements, they're on the INC website, there were statements that were made by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and other stakeholders at INC 1 in Uruguay in 2022 at the first round of negotiations. And we've been talking about this the whole time, and we've seen this influence the whole time. And since then, we've heard the same arguments, the same industry arguments, misinformation, distorting of the science being repeated in the negotiating rooms, and we've also subsequently seen ambition getting lowered at each stage of negotiations. So we're seeing this happening in the negotiation rooms, and yeah, it does not have to be this way. I think we've been calling for protections against conflicts of interest and corporate capture since the beginning. And one thing I want to highlight is, I mentioned the tobacco industry. One example of protections that were set up in a treaty is in the Tobacco Treaty. The Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, the FCTC, has a specific Article 5.3, which requires governments that are party to the FCTC to take actions to protect the negotiations from the vested interests of the tobacco industry. This recognition that the industry has a fundamental conflict of interest with the goal of the treaty is in that treaty, but and it's, it hasn't been brought into the negotiations here, but it's absolutely the same issue. There is a fundamental, irreconcilable conflict of interest between the companies that are producing plastics and all of us here who want to end plastic pollution. And I think that's fair to say. We've heard that in the last 2 days, that countries want in the objective the words end plastic pollution. It's the title of the resolution that set up the mandate to negotiate this instrument. So I think it's hard for me to understand why that hasn't been accepted more than in these conversations. And I think for me, we're setting up a treaty for the long term, and so we need to include protections in this treaty and in the future COPs to make sure that what we're doing doesn't lead to the same playbook where climate COPs have seen more and more lobbyists at each round of negotiations. And so there are things that we can do. I think, first of all, these conversations are super important. This has been an amazing panel so far, and we should not be normalizing this. I think that's the first step. This is not normal. This should not be the way that it works. And we have been calling on member states since the beginning, even more so now as we've seen the negotiations progress, on putting conflict of interest protections in the text of the treaty and in the future COPs. And I think to Jeannine's point, we have the power. And to Ehud's point, we're having more and more publications coming out about showing that they knew all of these things. They knew about the chemicals. They knew the chemicals would make the plastics really hard to recycle. We know these things, and we, as public interest, civil society, and as representatives of communities from around the world, we are not going anywhere. I can promise you that. And we are going to keep talking about this, whether it's INC 5.3 or whether it's at a future COP. We'll see in about a week. But I think that's a really, really key message, is it doesn't have to be this way. There's examples of things that we can do, and we should be doing them.